2023 edition of the Fuse Community Call. Hope you're all doing good out there. It's great to see so many of you engaged with the future of the Fuse network. If you're watching us on YouTube, smash the like button and remember to subscribe. And don't worry, I'm not going to keep saying that all the way through the video. So today you've got me, that's Ian Kane, and I'm here with some key members of the Fuse team. We're here to tell you the community about what we've been working on, how it's all going, and what's coming really soon. So what are we doing here today is a big question. So the calls allow the audience members to participate, throw questions at us, and generally it just gives us a more transparent view of what's happening at Fuse. So we live stream the calls, and then they're available immediately afterwards on our YouTube and Twitter and LinkedIn, so you can unpack any of the information that you hear here today. So before we jump off, we've got two people in the call. How you doing today, guys? Rob, how you doing?
Doing fantastic, thanks, Ian.
Nice. Ira, how you doing today?
Almost as fantastic as Rob.
Two fantastic people in the call. I'll add a third. We're good to go. All right. So Rob wants to lay out a little bit of a foundation here. So we're going to kick off with Rob. And he wants to share a high-level overview, the kind of broader picture, and priming Fuse for mass payments, So Rob, take it away, man.
Yeah, it's a short one. I suppose just to reiterate the ultimate mission that we're on, Fuse, the ecosystem on Fuse is diverse, right? You'll find all kinds of stuff within the Fuse ecosystem. Our ultimate North Star is mainstream adoption of Web3 payments. That's what we're focused on. We're seeing a paradigm shift taking place and have been seeing, for the past couple of years. We've got big brands like Starbucks, Nike, Gucci, Adidas. We see news stories periodically, regularly. Deloitte have come out recently and it was last year they pulled a report saying that 75% of businesses are eyeing Web3 payments. It's easy for Starbucks to do a POC, right? To do a proof of concept, throw $10 million down and do some innovative concept around Web3 payments or NFT based loyalty points. It's not so easy for small businesses and startups, and that's the focus for Fuse. It's really about ensuring that small businesses and the smaller guys out there have access to the tools they need to be part of this huge paradigm shift, essentially. So that's what we're focused on at Fuse, and it's what we'll be focused on, long into the future.
Nice. All right, thanks, Rob. Thanks for that. And I think unless you've had your head under a rock, most people can definitely attest to that. We are seeing a trend towards payments. We're seeing mass adoption of crypto through different means lately. So it's exciting times for what we're doing. And we have another person in the call here. We have Ira, who is heading up strategy at Fuse. Ira, you're kind of new at Fuse. Would you like to introduce yourself, say hello? And then also you worked quite a lot on this Power Validators FRC. So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hey all, so a little bit about me. I originally come from a legal background. I used to represent some of the more interesting fintechs in recent years in the Middle Eastern and North African region, as well as in Europe and in the US. I was a GC myself with some of these projects. I later moved on to work with inside of these companies, working alongside governments and regulators, as well as consulting the United Nations on issues concerning the implementation of blockchain. In the past couple of years, I've been working with the largest crypto companies, large crypto exchange, startups, and what have you. And since then, I've been an entrepreneur myself. Now, when I heard about Fuse and the vision that Robert just outlined, that is targeted at businesses and the business layer, that really spoke to me. And it was an excellent opportunity to come and help shape these and help make this and help execute this vision into a reality. But most importantly, I don't think that a lady can pass on the opportunity to work with fine gentlemen such as yourself. You know it.
Wow, that's it. End the call right here. We're done.
But also the FRCs and the Power Validators. So as we are just about to dive into this, Power Validators are a crucial entity in the Fuse network and where we are going with this in order to achieve the vision that Robert just executed. So we will dive into that in a second.
That's it. Thank you, Ira. Thank you for those compliments. I think Robert and I are very overtaken with those. That's nice.
Oh, much obliged.
You can stay. That's why we got Ira on board, obviously, just to give nice compliments to us guys. So thank you for introducing yourself. We will be seeing a lot more of you in these calls and ongoing through the Fuse community calls that we do. So first of all, go on. First of all, just before we kick off, FRCs. So I just want to explain briefly to people what FRCs are. We've been shouting about them for the last week. These are Fuse requests for comment. So let me just briefly outline what they are before we dive in so that everybody's in the same place. So they are proposals concerning changes in governance, tokenomic structure, or other decisions concerning the Fuse network. FRCs are not necessarily always technical changes and improvements. So they cover a wide range of things. Some FRCs are pretty straightforward and require just a simple response concerning a particular project, a grant, for instance. And some of them are more complex, such as this one, and are followed by detailed explanations and several questions open to voting. So this one had 4 questions attached to it. How do FRCs relate to FIPs? So if a complex technical update is required, we will first put that out as an FRC. People will speak. We will ask the community for their feedback. And then, if needed, that will move to a FIP, which is a Fuse improvement Fuse improvement, I want to say protocol.
Proposal.
Completely forgotten the word. Sorry, guys. Proposal. So that's when they move over to on-chain voting by the Fuse community via Snapshot. So just to outline the difference between the two there. So you'll hear us shouting about these things quite a lot. All right, let's jump in now that we know what everything is. So we spoke briefly at the beginning about priming Fuse for payment. So Rob, let's go a bit deeper on this. Tell us more about this. We're priming the network for the mass adoption and regarding payments.
Yeah. So if we really want to compete with the likes of Visa and Stripe and other big players in the payment space, then it's about much more than just providing peer-to-peer transactions. There's so much more that comes with it, right? We need to provide the kind of infrastructure, robust infrastructure that allows operators to provide their consumers with key features. A key one is account abstraction, right? It's been the buzz for the past couple of months in the space. Account abstraction is something that Fuse has been doing for a number of years now. It allows us to remove that complexity, to remove that the need, essentially, the key feature is removing the need for consumers to pay fees themselves. So to hold Fuse token or to hold Ethereum and to not only make a transaction, but also have that token to pay the fee. And then there's other things, real-time notifications, integrating with other existing systems, things like, leading e-commerce solutions like WooCommerce and WordPress, etc. And all of this is defined essentially as the business layer. Essentially, that's what's important. The business layer exists on Fuse. What we're going to be talking about here is how do we decentralize that business layer and how do we make it more robust and redundant and solid and long-term.
Okay, so important to mention, this is not something like we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. This is something that's been present on Fuse. We're just evolving it slightly as well, I guess. So, let's dive into Power Validators. First of all, what are Power Validators, and tell people why we need them?
So to properly address this question, I'm going to need to tap into what Robert just said. Since 2019 until today, pretty much, the development of Fuse as a payment-focused blockchain platform has primarily relied on the infrastructure, and by infrastructure, I mean middleware stack, that was created by Fuse Labs. Now, if we want to prime Fuse for mass business and consumer adoption, like Rob explained, it requires the introduction of new roles and entities within the Fuse ecosystem that will bring further utility to the Fuse network and its stakeholders. So to understand what are these entities, let us kind of spell it out. We have the operators, who are real-world business application, games, DApps, and anything that could run on the Fuse stack, essentially. They develop and maintain applications that involve payments. They are responsible for the seamless onboarding of users to these applications on Fuse. They support their users and follow corresponding local regulations where they operate, be it Thailand, the UK, Europe, or where have you. Now, Power Validators run and maintain the payment infrastructure that operators use to facilitate payments. And what are these things precisely? So let us move ahead.
Let's dive in a little bit. Do you want me to pull up the diagram here? Will it help you a little bit in explaining things?
Yeah, sure thing. Why not?
Pull that up. Yeah. Okay, one sec. Here we go.
So before we explain this wonderful piece of joy and happiness that we see on the screen right now, let's understand what blockchain L1s are and what do they do and where Power Validators fit in. So blockchain L1, layer 1, be it Fuse, BNB, Ethereum, or what have you, they are great technological advancements. But L1s as such are not enough in and of themselves to actually replace payment infrastructure for businesses at once. So let's take just one example. While it's relatively simple and easy to sign a transaction and transfer an amount to, say, Rob or to you, Ian, it's far more complex for me to have recurring payments and once a month to you and once a month to Rob. For that, I will need something else. I will need something additional because, simply put, layer ones are not built to accommodate these types of payments. However, even this very simple example illustrates a very mundane part of business making or the business sector. We all pay once a month automatically to someone or have a recurring payment somewhere, or we want to get a receipt for a payment or an invoice or just a notification that a payment was made. These are all very mundane and very basic things that fall within the ambit of what are payment services for businesses. However, an L1, as we said, is not enough. So blockchain applications and wallets depend on various other middleware services that are external to the on-chain logic. In the Fuse stack, those services include transaction relays, account management, wallet APIs, verifications, and more. And while validators, which we already have on the Fuse network, are essential for transaction approval, we found in our experience since 2019 working with businesses that the payment flow that we want to provide is much more complex. So how would this payment flow actually look like? A user wants to pay a merchant, a business. What will he do? The user will open the application developed by the operator and initiate the payment flow. So far, so good. Behind the scenes, the operator application signs the transaction with the user's private key and relays the signed transaction to the Power Validator network using the Fuse SDK. The Power Validator receives these transactions, validates them, bundles them together, and relays them to the blockchain network. These transactions are confirmed by the validators and added to the block. And then finally, the merchant receives the funds to their wallet. Now, this payment flow, which goes beyond just sending you or Robert 5 Ether, for instance, requires a more elaborate infrastructure of smart contracts and backend services. And this is precisely where Power Validators bring this utility to the Fuse network. They will allow us to perform this very complex payment flow that is very essential and necessary to any business that actually wants to implement blockchain as a method of payment.
I think one of the key messages there is for business, right? One of the things that's come out clearly there is that it's a model for businesses to adopt. So thank you, Ira. That was an amazing explanation. Like, Rob, no pressure on the next answer, by the way. Like, you just nailed it. So that's, as you can see, Ira is a new member of our team, and I think it's very clear why we've got her in. So thank you, Ira, for that. Let's just jump.
My blue eyes and blonde hair, just making sure. Was
your picture on
the
scene was very different to the one that we see today, right? So
I get that often, you know.
Definitely. So yeah, no pressure, Rob. No pressure. So we've outlined what are Power Validators and why do we need them and the change that it'll bring. So that's why we've put this out to vote. We want the community to vote on this. So Rob, why was this change in the Fuse network required? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So I tend to be short in my answers. The number one word is redundancy, right? The business layer exists essentially. There are centralized node services essentially, and there are SDKs via which you can get access to these services. They can always be improved, of course. What we're trying to do here is to provide redundancy. That means that we're not providing on one actor to provide the service, but instead we rely on multiple actors. And if you want to provide redundancy and rely on multiple actors instead of one actor, then you need to update the incentivization model. This is what Bitcoin did years ago, right? We no longer relied on centralized entities who are providing all the services, instead of relying on many, in which case you need to look at the incentivization model and say, well, how do we ensure that all these different actors, these decentralized actors in the network, are being incentivized properly. So one is infrastructure, looking at the infrastructure, looking at the security implications, looking at the sort of the feature-based implications and how we make this scalable and usable for businesses. And then how do we incentivize people in the right way to make it sustainable, essentially. So that's why it's required. Redundancy and then
nice.
incentivization.
Okay. Ira, anything to add on to that?
Well, in the spirit of avoiding redundancy, I guess not, because I'll touch on several issues that Rob raised in a minute.
All right, cool. Let's jump in. So is it just about relaying? Because we spoke about relaying in our forum post as well, or is Fuse focused on, is Fuse trying to focus on relaying as a service like Gelato? Ira, do you want to tell us a bit more about that? I think there was a bit of confusion there.
Yeah. So just to be on the safe side, let's make sure that we're all on the same page with respect to what it is that we mean when we say relaying. Relaying, at least in this context, means bundling several gasless user operations into one transaction. But what are these user operations? So such user operations may include transaction abstractions, recurring payments, and other complex operations. The relay service is the inaugural service available for Power Validators to operate, and it has been instrumental in the growth of businesses in the Fuse network for a while now. So in other words, no, we're not only about relaying, we are about relaying at the first phase. But we have not created relaying just now. In fact, Fuse has been offering relaying for a while now. The service facilitated gasless transactions for over, I think, 180,000 unique users and has been the backbone of this growth. Permitting Power Validators to operate the relay service will significantly enhance its robustness and decentralization, ultimately promoting a thriving Fuse ecosystem. But again, like I said, this is only the first phase. In phase 2, we aim to decentralize most of the functionality of the Fuse stack that does not require centralized middleware. So in addition to relay services, Power Validator service will also include indexing the Fuse network and providing user-friendly APIs for querying assets and wallets, running Oracle nodes to provide price and other data feeds that are necessary for payment applications, the implementation and operation of bridges between Fuse network and other blockchain networks, and also with respect to user identities. So upon user verification, a user will receive a digital identity as a soul-bound token utilized to identify them on-chain later on. So we definitely go beyond the relaying service. Yeah. We are not supposed to be Gelato. We are a layer 1 that on top of its very basic services also offers middleware, that one of its services is also relaying.
Relaying as well. Okay, nicely outlined there as well. So I've got a question for both of you, and it's one that's been thrown at me. So you can both put your spin onto this as well. So if Power Validators are so kind of essential, then why are other networks not using them? Now, yeah, you guys can answer this. I think, yeah.
Rob, do you want to take this one first?
So, you know, once again, it's really about the business layer is being provided elsewhere, right? These are services that are built on top of the blockchain that allow us to make it easier for developers and entrepreneurs and businesses to build on top of the blockchain. They'll exist on other networks, but in perhaps a more sort of sporadic fashion, if you like. So you'll find lots of different providers here, there, and everywhere. It will be difficult to go out there and find these different services and bundle them together in order to be able to build your application. In the case of Fuse, because our focus is on startups and small to medium-sized businesses and on smaller players in general that have less resources, we focus on what we call vertical integration or end-to-end integration to make the building process harmonious, basically, to make it as harmonious as possible and as easy as possible, to reduce the time to ship, and to generally sort of accelerate the ultimate transition, right? So Web3 payments. So it's really about it's our unique sort of way of doing this, our unique selling point, essentially, which is vertical integration of the business layer whilst ensuring that it's decentralized and robust and redundant.
Yeah, I can only agree. I will only add my 5 cents that, albeit they are not called Power Validators, you will find like 10 amount entities in other projects. You mentioned Gelato previously, so Gelato being one example, by economy maybe in a different example. They may not be called Power Validators, but instead they are called executors or a cucumber. It doesn't really matter how you call them. The question is, what do they do and what is their functionality? By contrast to some of the projects that I mentioned that are essentially centralized and are also not L1, like Robert mentioned, Fuse is not only a decentralized L1, it also builds middleware that goes on top of it to achieve precisely that, the end-to-end integration that is feasible. So no, you will not see Power Validators on most L1s simply because they're not necessary there. You will see them in projects that are where they are necessary.
And it's terminology as well. We've used the words Power Validators, right?
Yeah.
That's our lexicon that we're using to describe. So perhaps we caused a bit of confusion there, but just to outline that, yeah, it's sort of a name that we're using, but it's not a brand new idea, that's for sure. So thinking about that and sort of thinking about why should people want to become Power Validators? Maybe Rob, you can take this one. Like, again, it's incentivization, obviously, but yeah, why should you want to become a Power Validator in the Fuse ecosystem?
Yeah, I suppose part of it is because maybe you want to be part of the the transition. Part of you want to be part of the innovation and allowing us to create new types of experiences, new types of consumer and merchant experiences. Ultimately, yeah, it does come down to incentivization. Why, what's in it for me, basically, as an infrastructure provider. It's the same that was in it for the early infrastructure providers on Bitcoin back in 2008, or later on with other networks and Ethereum, etc., because they're being paid to do so. What's interesting here is that it's a brand new area of growth, essentially. Everything that's been happening in the past 10 years in this space has been about infrastructure, essentially. Slowly but surely, we're building this network, right, of nodes, of validators that wrap around planet Earth, and they're providing this new layer, essentially, this new transaction layer and business layer that allows us to change the way that we do business. This is just a brand new growth area. You're not just validating transactions; you're validating or providing the infrastructure, the platform for other types of services. As Ira's mentioned, indexing. It could be oracles. It can be, more business related things like KYC. There's a bunch of different things, and it's a brand new growth area for existing infrastructure providers, and why not brand new ones as well?
Yeah, it's a good point. Like SaaS, like software as a service, seems to be a sort of peaking trend at the moment. Like you say, there's been a lot of infrastructure built over the last kind of 8 to 10 years, and now people are realizing that they can set up as a software company and basically ship this out. So it's a trend we've seen as well. So yeah, it's in keeping with that. So one of the biggest questions we had on the forum, there was 2 questions relating to NFTs on the forum. So and it actually provided a lot of discussion. So the 2 questions we had there were: should Power Validators receive an NFT representing their services and reputation? And then the second part of that: should Power Validators be able to trade their representative NFTs? Now, these 2 questions got a lot of responses. So I think there was a little bit of confusion, and perhaps especially with the question 4, should they be able to trade their NFTs? So let's jump into this, guys. Let's start with the first bit, and let's just outline what these NFTs are for and why this idea exists.
Should I go first?
Yeah.
So the initial idea here when thinking about NFTs for validators is how can we give the validators something that's unique, essentially, and that represents their position as a validator within the network. As we continue to develop this idea, we'll start to think about things, for example, such as how many power validators can there be on the network, right? What's the maximum number of power validators they can be, and therefore how would you come to limiting those power validators? So that's where the idea of an NFT becomes valuable, because there can be a certain number of NFTs, they're unique. But then as we sort of develop on top of the idea, we start to think about power validators and the NFTs that they own as a proof of their power validation, And then you start to think about their rating, essentially. So think of an Uber driver, for example, who over time receives a rating, right? You got a 4.5 out of 5 rating as an Uber driver. On top of that, there'll be certain areas of your service as an Uber driver, whether the car is clean, for example, or whether the taxi driver turns up on time, and other sort of specificities around your service as an Uber driver. And we envision something similar essentially for Power Validators. So you get this. There's almost a link to a soulbound token, although soulbound tokens are normally linked to an individual. In this case, linked to a business on a particular address. So the idea is you have a PV Power Validator NFT, and then attached to that are certain characteristics, basically about the level of service that you're providing. And then based on that, it can also impact the level of incentivization or even punishment that the validator might get. But there's definitely room for this to be developed further. Those questions were designed to get the community thinking also about what this could look like, and how NFTs could be used to make the whole system more smarter, essentially.
And it was well debated as well, and it was an interesting part of it. And I think the bit that people got slightly confused on was, should they be able to trade them? So, for example, in the system that you've just described, Rob, if you're, example, doing an amazing job at being a PV, and you've got this sort of badge of honor of being this PV, how can you then kind of sell that to somebody else who then has to do the same? They have to be you, right? They have to be as good as you. They have to uphold the service. So what's the theory behind this? Or have we miscommunicated it slightly?
No, I think we communicated it exactly the way that it was perceived and understood. The idea was to generate a conversation, and we are very happy that we've seen actually a conversation around this issue. The general predicate behind the service NFT or the reputation NFT is threefold. It's accountability, transparency, and efficiency. So we want to hold, if we identify, and we do identify Power Validators as a crucial entity that plays a very important role with everything on the Fuse network, then we must hold them accountable in the sense of incentivized and held responsible to their conduct and their service level. So we want people to become Power Validators. We want them to do a good job, and we want all the operators to also know that they've done a good job. We want to create a market whereby an operator can see that someone is 10 out of 10 in relaying. So perhaps this is the person that they want to use, or this is the Power Validator that they want to use. But conversely, we see that perhaps we have a Power Validator that runs Oracle services, but he has been jailed several times or had other issues or other problems relating to his service provision. Then we want to reflect that as well. Essentially, we don't want to end up with a lemon market whereby we have so many Power Validators that perform the service on an unsatisfactory level. With respect to the question of tradability and the ability to trade these NFTs, the potential rationale that might explain or justify such tradability, and I'm not saying that I support it or that this will be the decision that will be made by the network, is that we want to create an long-lasting incentives for someone to become a Power Validator from birth until the end of your times. So we want to create a fee-based or reward-based incentive that will get you to become a Power Validator. But if you're done, or you want to switch services, or just don't want to keep the hardware, and you achieved a certain status, we want you to maybe enjoy the opportunity or to trade that, to have this less perk at the end. Again, this goes down to the question, what does the NFT represent? If it represents a type of service that you performed and you're now done with this service performance and want to sell it to a different Power Validator that meets all other requirements, then perhaps it is possible. But if it's reputation pegged NFT, it's very difficult to trade reputation. This opens up this situation to manipulation and speculation and abuse and all sorts of problems. And these are precisely the type of concerns that the community members have given rise to. They're all valid and legitimate and have been taken into account, and a decision that will be made will reflect that. So that's on NFTs.
Okay. Yeah, it was a really interesting part of it. And now, like, thank you for explaining that as well. And the actual idea of trading them, yeah, it's got quite a lot of nuance to it, right? Like another PV could come in and replace somebody, but then they would have to uphold their standard. And if they lose points over time, then they become lower. I mean, it's more than possible, actually, once you start to think about it a bit more in depth.
There's room for NFT, for Power Validator NFTs to be traded, i.e. the right to be a Power Validator. I don't think that it's right for the reputation to be transferred over to somebody else.
That's hard, right? Like that's like buying. It's like if you build a business and then you want to sell it, the people who take it need to operate in the same way you did. Otherwise, it's basically just a lemon, like you say. So yeah, interesting. All right. So they were the questions that we kind of developed around the FRC and the Power Validator idea. So what we've got next is a bunch of questions that we've been collecting from the forum and through our Telegram chat. So Ira, I'm going to point most of these. Actually, I'm going to point all of these at you.
Oh, lucky me.
Lucky you. So some of them are pretty straightforward. And some of them are going to tease the net. Like we need to speak about the next FRC as well, but we'll run through these questions and then we'll do a couple of we'll speak about the next FRC. So questions directly from the forum. So in regards to Power Validators, people were asking about hardware requirements and in regards to, will I need to invest? Will I need to get different hardware? Ira, what's the kind of, where are we at with that at the moment?
So the question is yes, no, and it depends all at the same time. It's type of, it's an amazing situation whereby everything exists in the same time. No, I'm just joking. So at the first step, Power Validators during the beta stage are likely to be whitelisted. These whitelisted Power Validators, as we mentioned, will perform relaying services only during the beta stage, phase number 1. Okay. They will require hardware equipment to run these services. For this first phase, the same equipment required for running a node on Fuse is likely to suffice. There is no need for special mining equipment to be sent to you from China or where have you, but relaying from your iPhone will likely not cut it. In any case, we will publish a detailed guide on all equipment required for each service shortly. So definitely stay tuned for that.
And I think there was a similar question about software. And I think phase 1, no, later, perhaps. But again, we will update on that as we go through as well, right?
So that was almost. Wait. So the answer is that we will release software for each and every one of the phases. Software will be released shortly.
Okay, so it's a case of, and we'll shout out all the places to keep up to date here as well. So is Fuse going to be responsible for the software or will it include third-party products?
Without derogating from any right, argument, contention, or so on that might, no, I'm just joking. Fuse will be, with all necessarily legal caveats, will be responsible for the software in the sense that it will provide it, release it, debug it, and deal with issues that arise from it. Although not necessarily each and every single bit and piece of the software will be written and created de novo by Fuse, some might be from third parties, but yeah, what Fuse will release, Fuse will deal with.
All right, cool. Okay, the next question was about the management method. So how to become a PV, who administers them? Is it centralized or code-based? Is it, i.e., is it someone with a minimum stake? How are we handling this?
So I kind of touched on that with the hardware question. Again, phases. So during the beta phase, where we are only dealing with relay, to recall, we will whitelist Power Validators. We will deal with them and we will assist them once the system and the network achieves a certain maturity. Yeah, the aspiration is to have it decentralized, not go through the human factor, but work properly and seamlessly.
Okay, and without being too specific, otherwise our devs will kill us, timeline for beta testing, and will it be on SparkNet?
Yeah, it will be on SparkNet, and we will release the timeline shortly again, and kind of maybe jump in the gun a little bit. this is not the only FRC that we will have on the new changes that we're introducing to the Fuse network. This is but the first of several. So this is just a very initial temperature check that we're taking. Yeah. And once we have gathered all the temperatures, if you will, necessary to reach a decision, then we will start releasing roadmaps and timeframes that we can stand behind and stick to.
Okay. So last question from the, before we sort of get into the next FRC stuff. So this one's kind of vague as well. If PVs are in the same node set as normal nodes, will the services they offer take longer to process as only some nodes in the set are PVs? For example, having to wait for a Power Validator node to mint a block.
So that's an interesting question. If I understand it correctly, then we envision a situation whereby you use the same hardware, for instance, to run, to validate, and as well as to relay. And then I need to wait as an operator, as it were, for you to finish relaying. So your machinery will be free now for my transactions, regular transactions, so to speak. So the answer is no. If we get to the situation, something went wrong. As noted with respect to the hardware question, our recommendation is that you would have a separate hardware required for the Power Validator service that you perform. In this situation, the example that I just gave will not be created. It will be more practical than, it will be more theoretical than real. Do you know what I mean? No. We are not gonna be left with the situation of a slow or stuck network as a result of Power Validators using double dipping into hardware and so on in such situations. And we will implement certain mechanisms, again, to maintain accountability, SLA, a certain level, and so on. So we should not get there.
We shouldn't have that sort of relay. Okay, so as I said, I want to tease the next FRC. So some of the questions that we got were about what was the minimum stake to be a PV? Do you have additional lock-in and jailing? Is there a need for doxing of the team, fiat handling, service levels? A lot of this stuff we're going to talk about pretty soon, right? We're going to go ahead and cover a couple more FRCs. Do you want to just tease those a little bit so people know what's coming?
Absolutely. So we will be publishing FRCs on these subsequent issues precisely. The minimum staking requirement, jailing, slashing, penalties, and everything related to that. This is coming next. This is coming shortly after we are done with the voting on this one, which, by the way, ends in a couple of days. So definitely vote and leave your comments if you haven't thus far. I really hope that we will get the same or far higher even level of engagement from the community. So if you have questions or you think that maybe the way that we presented different options, hint, hint, to the answers that will, in the answers, write down a different answer, propose a different view or a different perspective. This is very important to us. We go through it very in a very dedicated manner. So this is really, really significant for the network. So we will be dealing, just to recap, with staking requirements, with exiting, with penalties, with jailing, with slashing, and with additional related issues. So definitely stay tuned and vote. Vote, vote, vote.
Vote, vote, vote. It's your time to vote. I always hear people say that nobody listens to what they say. This is like that opportunity to actually have you can get listened to, right? So the voting closes on the 29th of April. So that's just a couple of days. The link for the forum is here if you need it. You can always head over to Fuse to read more about the entire proposal and everything else. I think that's kind of it for today. We've done a pretty good job of wrapping everything up, I think. If there are more questions about the FRC, this particular Power Validators one, please do fire them at us. We're more than happy to answer those on Twitter or wherever. Rob, anything you want to close with today, perhaps about the importance of voting in our ecosystem? We've been really pushing on this the last week or so, right? So,
yeah, I think we've got a few more days left. I think it's to the end of the month. Maybe extended, but I don't think it will be. I think we'll stop it in a few days. I'm not sure And yeah, there's more to come. Essentially, there's more to come on this subject, and we're building it, partly with the community.
That's it, right? So that's it for this month's community call. I want to thank people for tuning in and taking part, and thank you for all the questions we got in advance, and thank you for taking part in what we're doing here at Fuse. It means a lot to us. So as I say, all these videos are available afterwards. So they're on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. If you want to go and unpack any of the stuff that we've spoken about today and kind of dissect it, then you can do that immediately afterwards, all right? So you can take your own time with that. If you have any more questions, please email us or drop us a line on our Twitter or Discord. We're always keen to answer those questions. In the meantime, keep up to date with Fuse by locking into our YouTube channel. Smash like and subscribe. I snuck it in there just one more time. And you can definitely follow us on Twitter. That's where you'll get all our alpha from as well. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you all soon. Take care.